Welcome to the Super Abound podcast, where vision-led entrepreneurs learn to build a generous business without sacrificing what matters most. You are listening to episode 362, How to Handle Fear in Your Business. Hello, I'm joined today by Steve.
Hey, everybody.
Before we jump in, I wanted to mention something because it is something that will support further exploration of today's episode. I have started a new email series called the Return on Joy newsletter. And every week I am sending something out to my email subscribers all about something that brings me joy, not only as a business owner, but as a whole human being. And some of these things are tools. Some of these things are, just little enhancements in our life that I'm really enjoying. Because one of the things that we always try to do here at Super Abound is help you think through whole life success and what that really means to you. So as we are talking about how to handle fear as a business owner when it comes up for you in your business, I think those types of topics get spoken about a lot. We've talked about fear many, many times. And I just want to remind you that the point of your business and your life is not just to handle the hard, tough things. It is also to enjoy what you are creating. And so my little Thursday newsletter love note is designed to just inspire you to remember to take care of your own joy. And if you like some of the things that I share there, you can try them for yourself.
Hear, hear. As the editor and sender of said newsletter,
Yes,
I can
sending it to you, not me.
it's delightful. I learn a lot about you by reading your messages. I'm like, oh, that's been a lot of fun this week. So Erin definitely takes a moment to distill all the thoughts and things that are going on and say, this is something that'll boost you in a small but not insignificant way, sometimes in a big way.
Yeah. And, for me on a personal level, and for anyone who is really trying to bring more joy into their life, knowing that I have to send that out every week is also good for me because it does not allow me to stagnate or, stew on the hard things. But we are going to talk about one of the hard things today, because if you run a business, if you even run a team within somebody else's business, fear comes up. And if you don't know how to handle it, it's going to be problematic for you.
Yeah. And I think the key distinction that we want to make throughout this conversation is that there is healthy fear that should be respected and listened to and followed because it's there to prevent big mistakes and catastrophes. And there is, we could call it conditioned fear or unexamined fear. We'll have to figure out what word we use by the end of the conversation, which really is about maintaining the status quo and preventing you from expanding your boundaries into the unknown or somewhere that you haven't gone before. So just as a broad outline for the conversation, those are kind of the two forces of fear that we're working with.
So it is really hard to distinguish or discern sometimes the difference between fear, types of fear, because ultimately it's a survival response, and all fear comes up to keep us safe.
Yeah, that's its job. It's hardwired as a protection mechanism. There's a funny picture that a friend sent where he's posing next to a sign on the edge of a cliff, and it says, "Listen to that nervous feeling inside you." And we had a good laugh because this is someone who gets some grief for being a bit cautious in their life. But they said, "No, look, I'm just listening to that nervous feeling inside me." And so that sign is there to keep people safe and not jump off that cliff into the water below, because it looks like fun, to do a big cliff dive. But it says, look, people can get hurt here. So we're telling you, listen to that fear.
And that is like, I have a pet peeve where sometimes like a really good idea turns into kind of like a rigid rule. Elena and I just did a whole podcast on business rules and stuff over at the Coaching Mixer. You can find that at bsuperbound.com/coaching mixer. But we talked about business rules in the coaching world. And some of these things start off as really good ideas, the whole idea of feel the fear and do it anyway. In a certain context, the people who originally said that probably meant one thing that was really helpful for that particular scenario in which they said it. But now we have people say, I'm afraid, so that's a good thing. I should lean into my fear and da 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 da, and it's okay to be scared. In some contexts, that is true. But when we take something and we kind of make it a blanket law, and then we try to line up our whole entire business and life behind it, I do think that is problematic. I think it's like really taking away the complexity of something that ultimately is designed to keep you safe. And it stops us from examining when fear is a nervous feeling that is designed to stop you from breaking your neck as you dive into something that you are not maybe prepared for.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess as we approach this idea of fear, the starting place is to acknowledge it and then process it, whether that's by yourself with your journal and then bringing it to your coach, or process it in real time with your coach. Definitely do so with someone that can help you understand, like, is this something that's going to open up my boundaries and help me stretch into something new? Or is this just a bad idea that I'm infatuated with for whatever reason, and I'm taking that fear to mean I should therefore do it? Those are two very different paths.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, we are biased. We think you should always take these things to your coach, or like whoever your person is. It doesn't have to be a business coach. It could be, your therapist, another practitioner, that someone you really trust who can hold a greater perspective of the situation and is not going to get embroiled in the emotional energy with you. I would say actually that might be the discerning thing for me, is when I have a fear and I am so protective of it, I don't want to share that fear with anyone, and it feels very closed and very like stubborn almost. That is usually not a good place to be. We've talked so much about fear is a state that I would connect as static. It's the place between two clear frequencies. Often you're feeling fear when you're stepping into something unknown, something that feels like it might stretch you. But if you're not willing to talk about that with someone who you trust, I'm not talking about just like, somebody with a really limited mindset. I'm saying if you're not willing to talk about that with someone who can expand their point of view with you, that to me is like problem territory.
Yeah. And I think that comes into a fundamental feature of a successful business owner, is that you can unfold these things. You can unpack these things. Knowing that you have a blockage around sharing this with someone is the first step towards being able to do so. Because it's that not sharing that ends up having people jump off that cliff, metaphorically, usually, and launching really bad business ideas because they were not properly vetted, even discussed, almost used as an example of how strong you may be. But you don't want to prove how strong you are with something as significant as a business pivot, a rebrand, a new product, something that may be ill-advised, but because you sort of feel that fear, you jump anyway. That's the moment to really examine it.
Yeah. So I think what we're talking about is fear that you have a lot of defensiveness around and maybe an unwillingness to really examine because you think I'm tough and through. I don't need anybody. I'm a lone wolf. And you're going to line up a whole business pivot and a whole marketing plan without getting honest feedback outside of, I know a lot of people say, no, I talked to my team about it and they thought it was a great idea. I'm like, you talk to the people that you pay and ask them if it was a good idea. Of course they said yes. Of course, like if your energy is defensive around something and you're like, I'm scared, but we're doing this because I really feel strongly about this new direction and who I want us to be, and I'm so terrified, and like that must mean it's a really good idea. I would say it would take a lot of guts for someone who you pay to push back on that.
Yeah, in that moment, they're feeling the fear of, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I can't say anything because the boss seems really committed.
Yeah, they're very committed. I'm going to get fired if I don't go along with it, if I push back. I realized kind of the contradiction of one of the things we said is like, okay, you could take those things to your coach. I realize you pay your coach. I hope you pay your coach. I hope you pay them really well. But I think somebody who's not afraid to process that with you, to go really deep with you and find out what is the static that's coming up saying. What is the fear concerned about? And the more you do that, I think, I notice with my own clients, that like my long-term clients, people get less defensive over time about their fear. More often than not, they're like, I'm sure this is a mindset shift that's going to happen, but I felt so scared about what we were about to move into. When you are not afraid of your own fear, you can get a lot of wisdom, and you can also usually figure out, is this a good idea that we've vetted? Not a good idea like, will it always work out and be perfect, but like, is this worth the resources that we're putting into this new initiative in our business?
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me that at the heart of this is your own degree of self-acceptance and feeling at home in yourself, in your life, in your business. It kind of brings us back to where you started the conversation, Erin, around it's not all about pushing. It's not all about dealing with the hard stuff. Sometimes it is just being okay with yourself, actually loving yourself, loving this moment, finding the joy in what's happening. And the more you're able to do that, the less you're going to feel the need to prove something to yourself or your team or the world about how worthy you are, right? If that worth is deep and intrinsic, that you're feeling it, you're present to it, then your desire to show them isn't going to win the day in the case of an idea that may best be left just in your own mind, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another important distinction is like, if the fear you're feeling is somehow tied to your identity. It's like, if this doesn't go the way that I have decided it should, then I'm going to hate myself, or I'm going to lose my position, or my business is going to shut down. Like, that kind of fear, I think, is worth unpacking. I don't think anybody should be glazing over decisions that, if they don't turn out exactly the way that you were hoping, that it's going to lead to the closure of your business. I've watched so many people, sadly, people who know a lot about mindset gamble on ideas and say, if I really just believe hard and I push and I don't give that fear an inch, like they get some like tough guy machismo thing going on. Women too, and not, it's not like just a purely masculine thing. There's there's something underneath that I feel like we want to pause. We want to pause and hear what that fear has to say, because if it's causing you to rise up and kind of go into attack mode, there's probably more to the story.
Well, and that's why we often always say, business is a spiritual practice. You have these moments that bring up, how am I feeling about myself? What do I see my contribution being in the world? And really reflecting, do I need to push this through? Do I need to, force this initiative in order to have the impact that I want? That's where the real magic can happen.
Yeah. The irony is often the people who armor up are the ones who really should be pausing and looking at what the wisdom in the fear is, like what that fear really wants them to know. And the people who maybe pause too long, maybe, really let fear stop them or stall them, and they have this kind of start-stop thing in their business. Let's talk about that maybe, because that usually those people tend to have fear that stagnates, not fear that really informs.
And I think that's where the, feel the fear and do it anyway, these tropes all came from, is because that is kind of the more common one. And that is where coaching can be absolutely transformative, right? Surfacing what could happen. Kind of one of my favorite things to do is actually just play through the what could happen, and find yourself in that gutter, having lost everything because you made that phone call. And then you realize, yeah, I probably won't end up in a gutter having lost everything because I made this phone call. That can be really illuminating, the leaps that the mind takes. And that's something that a great coaching session can shed light on, and doing that repeatedly can create that new habit, so that even if you're feeling that fear, you have the internal strength and the internal map for, like, no, I can make this phone call. I can take this action, whatever that might be.
Yeah. I mean, at different ends of the spectrum, I feel like fear has two speeds. It has the start, stop, like you're getting motion sick just from the stilted, halted way that it moves. And on the other side of the spectrum, it speeds through everything. So the first fear that we talked about tends to be more the speeding through. It's, I'm going to avoid what this fear might be trying to show me. I'm going to avoid anything that looks like getting in there and listening to it, because I don't even want to know what's going to happen. I'm just going to make it all happen. And so you armor up. The stagnating, stilted fear goes very slowly. It starts, it stops, it ideates instead of takes action. And so if you feel like, okay, where am I on this spectrum? If I'm having some fear come up, are you speeding past everything and totally avoiding it? Are you starting and stopping, thinking more than doing? Because ideally, with a thriving business, more often than not, you want to be moving at a steady pace. You want to be every day connecting with your vision, connecting to the next lantern in front of you, moving towards that. And some moments, things are going to come up and you're going to want to stop because it's scary, or you're going to want to plow ahead, show the world because it's scary. If you can get to a place where you're regularly getting support to examine your fears, whatever side of the spectrum that you tend towards, it will help you with steadiness. And I think sometimes we struggle to articulate how coaching can help a business owner. I think that that's really one of the most powerful things, is it helps keep you steady.
Yeah, it's funny because it's not sexy or flashy, like, right, look at me, I'm steady.
Right. I'm super consistent.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But that is how progress is made, right? If you can pause at the right moments, if you can move at the right moments, then progress is inevitable over the medium and long term. Even if you're like stopping right now, it's probably to prevent falling over the cliff. And if you're running really fast, it's going to be in the context of now is the time, let's take action. And over time, you become a steady operator. And yeah, what was coming to me on the business as a spiritual practice side is the Buddhist exhortation, the path of the middle way. They're like, don't get rid of everything, don't have everything, like just the middle way. Just be happy with where you're at. That's kind of my bringing in the ancient wisdom to this particular idea. But I think there's some real truth there that the path forward is not like proving that you've got it or like thinking it out because it's really scary, but actually being deliberate in how you move.
Yeah, because either way, when you're in the extremes, you're in the goal swamp. When you're in the extremes, you are either moving so fast because you need to prove something, to have the world see you in a certain way, to use your external accomplishments for validation. That is a clear sign to me that somebody is in the goal swamp. And if you are not moving at all, you've just accepted your lot in life. Everything's too hard. Big mountains are not yours to climb. It's all very like defeated, and you're usually like exhausted before you do anything because you've spent so much energy thinking about it instead of pulling yourself up and onto the path you want to be on.
Yeah, that steadiness means you're actually climbing the mountain.
Yeah. So the other side effect, because I know what we're talking about doesn't always sound fun. I'm like, ooh, so what you're telling me what I should do as a business owner or as a leader is get a coach. And then every week or every other week, I should get on a session with them and like expose my fears, work through those fears with another person. Like, I would rather go to the dentist than do that. Fear doesn't really love to be talked about. But I will say, this is my own experience as well as what I've witnessed with clients. But what I've started to notice with all forms of static, it could be doubt, it could be confusion, it could be overwhelm, fear, of course. The more I bring that static forward, the more willing I am to listen to it deeply, hear what it's got to say, get the gold nuggets of wisdom that very often it does have to offer. The results of doing that stack up in my life and in my business. So what I used to do as a business owner is I was the person who just avoided. I was over on this side of the spectrum. I made that one sound really bad, but like that was me. I would just have an idea and I'd be like, okay, I'm inspired, so that's what I must do. I would talk to no one about it. I would spend months preparing something, and then I'd put it out into the world and I'd be like, ta-da. And I would usually sometimes it went well. There were successful moments, but a lot of times like crickets, terrible results. And rather than examining that, because I kind of felt ashamed that it didn't go the way I wanted, I'd be like, never mind, next thing, let's go. And I would just go through this cycle. And I did this as a business owner for years. When I finally started to work with a coach that I trusted, and I did not hesitate anymore to bring these things up, I would move through decision-making in a much more steady way. I was able to connect, like, what am I thinking about or inspired about? Is that actually in alignment with my vision right now? Do I really have the bandwidth to do it? And how can I like market test this before I pour resources into it? That shit works. Those things have helped us create a lot of success because they were in collaboration with the universe. They were in communication with our community. I still have wild ideas that I test out just for fun, but I'm no longer using a failed experiment as like defining who I am as a person, nor am I using something that worked to redesign my whole business around. I actually see, and I get a little bit excited. I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling some fear around this. Is this fear stagnating me? Is this fear pushing me to something because I don't really want to examine all the stuff around it before I make an informed, aligned decision? Clearing that up with somebody on a 30, 45-minute phone call consistently has helped me move so much faster. And I've watched the same thing with my clients. They're like, I got some juicy stuff today. And I'm like, ooh, what are we going to talk about? Like, we can kind of have a more playful, loving, and I'd say like, I know loving is kind of sounds like a cheesy thing to say, but like you can kind of just be like, ooh, there's some gold nuggets here in the dirt.
Yeah, it's real.
It's real. Yeah. And when you are not scared to look at those things, the results start to stack up. You're not like, ooh, I felt jealous and that's a terrible thing and I should never tell anyone. Ooh, I felt fear about this experiment and I should never tell anyone. It's like, there's some gold under here. What are we going to find?
Yeah. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you become in that space. You know, it's like exercising your physical body. It still is challenging, but you become more adapted to it, more wanting it. And we're basically talking about that with the emotional body, where instead of saying, okay, I can share my happiness, I can share my joy, but everything else is off limits, you start to expand into those other feelings and you realize that just makes me more human. It makes me more awake and alive, therefore more effective as a leader and business owner. But that's not the main reason. Again, just coming back to that first point, that the main reason for all of this is for you to have a life that you love and not just, you know, all the millions of dollars from being a successful business owner, but being at home in yourself.
Yeah. So long story short, don't just feel the fear and do it anyway, like blindly following something out of context. Find out how to hold the fear, examine the fear, find out what type of fear you're dealing with, and do not do this on your own. Obviously, if you have to do it on your own, if you're not at a place in your business where you can hire a coach, we wrote a book called Superabound, and we walk you through how to work through static emotions. You can find that at besuperabound.com/book. But if you're a successful business owner, work with us. You can find out more about how to get started at besuperabound.com/consultation and get on the Return on Joy newsletter list. I think that's over at besuperabound.com/collective. I'm giving you all the links, but all of it is in the show notes wherever you are listening to this podcast. This week's Return on Joy is going to be a good one. So hopefully you jump on that. And thanks, Steve.
My pleasure. Thanks. Thank you, Erin.
And thank you, Fear. Thank you, Fear, for not letting us jump off cliffs or, you know, any of the other ridiculous stuff that people do. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Take care.